Standards are a statement of a desired outcome, which in education is usually a description of the student learning. Achievement of standards is increasingly linked to a student being promoted or receiving a diploma. Students' results on standardized tests are being used to evaluate of schools, teachers, and principals. Standards with high-stakes testing such as state tests that must be passed in order to graduate. In education, standards are a specification for student learning. They can range in scope from being extremely global and ambitious to being very narrow and specific. The derived conception of standards stem from differing expectations. Business leaders tend to want high school graduates who are ready for work. They should be able to read, write, compute, as well as have dispositions that will make them a desirable worker. Policymakers think about the larger long-term need in society. They are concerned about graduates having the knowledge and skills that will help the U.S. maintain its competitive edge in a global economy. Parents choose standards based on their own personal goals and family history. Some parents want their children to go to a prestigious college. Others want their children to obtain a job immediately after high school. Common Core standards started only with English language arts and mathematics. They are learning-centered and not teaching-centered. Careful consideration has been given to what students should learn in each year of schooling and what high school graduates should know in order to be successful in post-secondary education or obtaining a job. In Common Core standards, traditional content such as literature and calculations are not directly mentioned. However, they are organized around major intellectual processes and strategies that are foundational to each subject. Each standard has three parts: core idea, scientific and engineering practices, and cross-cutting concepts. Students are expected to ask questions, argumentation, presenting oral and written explanations of understanding, reasoning, and questioning of explanations to others. Today's students and tomorrow's citizens are expected to be able to communicate orally in writing with their reasoning, explaining with their understanding of concepts, and question the reasoning of the others. Teachers should pose more open-ended questions than closed-ended questions that pose a problem and require students to think more deeply. With open-ended questions, many students contribute to the construction of a solution. Teachers need to deconstruct standards to identify key concepts, learning targets, learning objectives, and assessments. Countries around the world have learned that education plays a major role in being competitive. Also, the completion of schooling and college helps individuals develop higher-level skills that translate into higher incomes over their lifetime. Real-world standards. This conception of standards places primary emphasis on necessary knowledge and skills that will make students employable and enable them to live independent lives. Real-world standards are seen as being achievable in school. They set the expectation that students learn the basic skills of reading, writing, computing that allow them to be balancing checkbooks, preparing for job interviews, managing their daily lives, and maintaining employment. Standards that address the adequacy and appropriateness of instruction resources and the structures that provide the proper conditions for teaching and learning are called opportunity to learn standards. The intent is to ensure that all students have an equal chance to achieve the output of learning, which includes students with disabilities. Standards that address what students should know and be able to do in various subject areas such as science, math, and language arts, history, geography, social studies, and physical education are called content standards. They are most often accompanied by related content standards for what teachers should know about the subject that they teach and as well as their knowledge about instruction. Content standards establish the knowledge and skills that should be learned in various subjects. Since No Child Left Behind Act, educators have been concerned that important areas such as critical thinking and problem solving were being ignored. We have identified the knowledge, skills, and expertise that we believe students should master to be successful in this century. The four broad student outcomes are 1. Life and career skills, 2. Learning and innovation skills, 3. Information, media, and technology skills, and 4. Core subjects and 21st century themes. 1989 meeting. There was a call for the development of content standards to ensure that the nation's students would be first in international academic competitions. Goals 2000. which established a framework for moving students to world-class standards. Goals call for the following results before the beginning of the 21st century. All children in America will start school ready to learn. The high school graduation rate will increase to at least 90%. All students will leave grades 4, 8, and 12 having demonstrated competency over challenging subject matter: English, math, science, foreign language, civics, and government, and economics, art, history, and geography. U.S. students will be first in math and science achievement. NCLB called for a major testing program to ensure student performances on state tests were aligned with state student standards for each subject at grade level. Start of testing in math and English language arts. States were required to set a level of proficiency for determining whether standards were being met by students. Schools were expected to make adequate yearly progress, AYP, by showing that all of their students achieving that state proficiency level at grade level or above. It required low-income students, students with disabilities, ELL learners, students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds meet state performances for their grade level. Standard-based education are now driving what teachers teach. They are also the underlying basis for evaluations for schools, districts, teachers, and principals. Questions that could influence the future of standards. How will school organizations' use of time, graduation requirements, power relationships change because of the standards movement? Whether publicly claimed or not, CCS are embedded in the expectations for students' learning of what each state and district should be learning. There is a universal expectation that all decisions about instruction, student learning, teachers, and school quality will be based by data. Teachers need to pay significant attention to the ways of assessing student learning and using the information to design and adjust instruction. Assessment in education applies to many things: evaluations, grades, tests, performances, reflection, criteria, rubrics, and more. Assessments are part of the larger process of gathering information, interpreting the information, providing feedback, and ultimately adjusting the teaching strategy so that more learning can take place. Formative assessments are done to determine what students have learned and provide feedback to them so that both you and the students can understand where to go next. Summative assessments are to make a final judgment about whether the desired level of accomplishment has been obtained, such as passing a course. State achievement tests are designed as summative assessments that tell school officials, parents, and public whether students are meeting required benchmarks. They are assessments of learning. Educators should review the results to gauge how well their students have done and to consider changes in instructional strategies that could be made to ensure that students in the future do better in meeting standards. Summative assessments are determined who moves to the next grade level, who qualifies to graduate, or who is admitted to a profession. Students' essays, projects, portfolios are valuable resources for knowing how deeply students understand the concept of the subject. Observing students as they conduct experiments, demonstrate how to solve math problems, and interact with other students on a group project provide assessment information about students as learners and their learning. Assessments can help you identify the current levels of students' understanding of the concept or skill you are trying to teach. An analysis of the data on student learning can help you clarify what you want to do next to move the students to the next level. Assessments that are conducted formally or informally on a regular basis can help you find out which students are struggling with specific lessons. Diagnostic measuring. One important purpose of testing is to determine at what level a student is functioning compared to at the level at which he or she would be able to function developmentally. Having feedback from different sources should help teachers design a new and different instructional strategy that will assist a student who is having difficulty. Diagnostic assessments will provide different questions and tasks for students to perform in a specific area such as reading, writing, math, or motor skills. Norm reference assessments are used to demonstrate who is best in some areas. With norm reference assessment, the individual performance is compared with that of a norm group of similar individuals. This type of assessment does not reveal all that an individual child knows or is able to do. Criterion reference assessments compares a student's performance with a specific type of accomplishment or criterion. You can assess whether a student can add two-digit numbers without regrouping to measure the skill a student
could be asked to answer 10 different questions. If a child successfully answers all 10, or 9, or 8, a teacher can state with some degree of confidence that the child knows how to add two-digit numbers without regrouping. Capstone can be a summative assessment, and the information may be used formatively. Capstone assessments typically are developed to assess a milestone accomplishment or to determine how well a person has mastered an idea. This type of assessment is used near the end of a major accomplishment, such as the completion of a course or graduation. Achievement tests, basic skills tests, criterion reference tests related to the many sets of standards, cognitive ability tests, flexibility tests, and the critical thinking tests were developed, provide a limited view of what students actually are learning. Tests need to be authentic, which are assessment tests that are grouped in real-world settings and applications of what has been learned. And the tests need to be performance, demonstrating of learning through actually doing. Performance assessments can be used to demonstrate a specific proficiency. Authentic assessments are performance assessments that are authentic, representing another important characteristic of good measures, when the tasks are realistic in terms of being as close as possible to how the learning would be applied in the real-world setting. Authentic performance tasks could be journals, portfolios, interviews, observations, and student projects. 3 major areas to consider in developing authentic assessments for standards. First, a rich context needs to be designed, one that permits inquiry to occur. Second, it is important to fill the context with a wide variety of questions so that the different types of thinking can occur. And finally, critical indicators for learning need to be identified. First, begin by considering the learning standards, benchmarks, and objectives that are the intended learning outcomes. Then structure the tasks so they are complex enough to permit students to show important learning, motivate enough to encourage students to think, rich enough to offer multiple opportunities to show how and what students have shaped into an understanding, and relevant enough that students can use their own experiences. Students need to have ample opportunities to display what they know and can do across a variety of different standards: ability to solve problems, ability to perform and apply process skills, ability to structure thinking, collaborate with others, communicate, and ability to modify ideas on the basis of new evidence. Balanced assessments allow students to display many of these components of understanding and skill. The art of assessing will include identifying indicators, things that can be observed that relate to different aspects of learning related to the standards. A rubric is a scoring guide. It is a way to describe the different levels of accomplishment or degrees of being proficient. A rubric is not the measurement itself. It is a way of interpreting, scoring, and summarizing how well a student performed. Analytic rubrics refer to looking at each dimension of the performance and scoring each. Holistic rubrics refer to considering all criteria simultaneously and making one overall evaluation. Teachers need to consider how the learning goals and standards relate to lives and actions of scientists, writers, historians, and mathematicians. Consider what professionals do and how they use their different ways of knowing. Together, these considerations will often suggest ideas for the performance context.